Hey, everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. Welcome to Wayfind Marketing Live, where our goal is to make marketing easier so you can grow your business, grow your nonprofit. My name is Steve Phipps. I'm one of the hosts. My co-host is AnnieLaurie Walters. AnnieLaurie, how are you today?
Hey, good. Thankful for a long weekend. How are you?
Good. Yeah, the same. It's part of it'll be working, but part of it'll be spent playing as well.
Yeah.
And so, well, today we're going to be diving into blogging, and blogging is one of those marketing tools that most everybody's heard of, but there's a lot of different ideas about what blogging is, why they should do it, if they should do it, and so I want to start off, AnnieLaurie. I want to ask you because you do a ton of writing. Of course, when you're on Capitol Hill doing media and marketing for senators, a lot of writing there. And so for you, it's just sort of a natural outlet. And so you started blogging a long time ago, and you've continued to blog both personally as well as professionally. So just let's start off talking a little bit about sort of what a blog was, because I think there are some people, when they think about a blog, they think of what it was. And so there might be some hesitation in terms of, well, do I really need it? Because they sort of have this old idea of what it is. And then I would love to hear your thoughts in terms of, what have you seen? Because again, you do a lot of blogging for a lot of our clients. What are you seeing now in terms of how businesses and nonprofits can use a blog effectively to get more traffic and win more leads? And let me just preface the whole point of this show today is we want to talk about blogging as a tool to get more people to your website and to win more leads. And there's other benefits that come out of blogging. And if you have questions, toss them in chat. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll be happy to answer those questions. So anyway, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you talk about what blogs have been and what you're seeing now. And then we can get into more details, more tactical ideas on how to use a blog to grow your business.
Yeah, well, I will try to be brief because this is my bread and butter. You mentioned I was working on Capitol Hill, and I did work for a senator from Tennessee and Georgia, and I was on Capitol Hill on 9/11, and I started to send out emails to people and to update them and just tell them what was happening and how we're experiencing life. And that kind of translated into my entry to blogging, because I thought, well, let me just put it on a blog. Because at that time, blogging was really just your online journal. I mean, there were a few people who might be trying to use it for something different, but it was a lot of online journaling, and everybody had a platform now. Anybody who was connected to the internet could start their own blog and say the things and put them out there. But it did give voice to people that never would have had a voice, may have never gotten a publishing deal. But now people are getting book deals and they have a platform just because they were entertaining on their blog. It's crazy. But what we've seen is that over time, it's gone from this online journal experience to businesses who leverage it to get people on their website. And it's a tool that when you have a whole library of different content, specific content relative to your niche, when people go to Google and they're searching questions that your content answers, Google is going to spend time indexing and filing away all that great content on your site. And if it fits that Google search, they're going to match it up. And then people are going to land on your site. And I think that's what people who still think of blogging the way it was maybe, in the early 2000s, like that's not really what it is anymore. Surely people do still online journal and that sort of thing, but blog as a tool for marketing is very effective in improving your organic search optimization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, we talk a lot about the customer journey. And if you've not been part of those conversations or you've missed previous shows, you can go back to some of our podcasts and catch those. But your customers go through different stages. And, there's this initial stage where people are just trying to figure out what you do. That's curiosity. Then we move into enlightenment, where they're getting more information from us about how we work, how we help them. And then ultimately, there's commitment, and that's them deciding to do something, to take, a step that might involve some perceived risk. And so a blog is a really good way to help provide content for each of those stages. Now, one of the things that you just said that I want to go back to is getting traffic to your website. From your experience, what are some of the things that you would say are good about a blog in terms of getting more traffic to a website? Why is that?
Well, I think it goes back to the indexing and how Google works. I mean, it's all secretive. They don't give you everything, but the SEO experts of the world have managed to determine what types of things will get you more traffic and what types of, how do you structure the content? It's not just, I've written this great thing. I'm a great writer. I can write well. I'm going to put this blog out and it's going to change somebody's life. Well, that doesn't matter if it doesn't have the right kind of headers and H1 tags and a few keywords in the right place. Your awesome thing you wrote is never going to get picked up by Google if it's not structured correctly. So there's this element of just technique involved in it. It really has nothing to do with anything you learned in English literature. It's more about the technical structure of how that bot is scrolling the internet, looking and indexing and organizing information so that because Google's goal is to return the very best result to the person who's searching. And so you want to make sure that you have got all kinds of content, a library worth of content that is going to answer questions that your customers would be asking. That's what's going to bring them to your website.
So a couple of things. I want to pause here for just a second because you've shared some really good things that I want to make sure that we build on. I've got several questions right now. And so Catherine has asked, she's on LinkedIn, is a blog is it a term that people still use and even though it's changed and evolved? And I would say, Catherine, yes. Now, what we've seen is that sometimes people will call it something else on their website, maybe to give it a little bit of a different feel. They might list it under resources, but just a leader in the blogging space and with inbound marketing, creating fantastic content is HubSpot. And in fact, I've got their site pulled up. I'll share this just here quickly. Theirs is still a blog. That is what they call theirs. In fact, their subdomain here, blog.hubspot.com. When you go to their resources, they've got blogs. So yeah, I would say it is still a widely used term. The risk of coming up with a different name for it or calling it something different is it might not be clear. And so, I think that just comes down to a judgment call. Do you want to call it something else? And if you do, that's fine. I would just look to call it, something where people can easily understand. Sometimes people will just mark it as articles or, something along those lines.
Yeah. And the technical perspective, if you're working with a website company to build a website for you, they're going to probably just call that part of your website a blog anyway. That's just the common terminology for it, I think, nowadays. And I don't think that's going away.
Robert's asked a couple of questions from Facebook, and specifically to you. How have you been able to bridge the gap from personal to professional blogging or vice versa? Is it wise to use one flavor to generate interest in the other? Does personal brand matter for corporate or company blogging? Then he's got a second question that we'll come to in just a minute.
I think those are fantastic questions. And those are questions I get a lot from people because I know several solopreneurs, for example, who have started with blogs that they're writing for personal reasons and they get a lot of traction. They've had some, minor viral shares, maybe 200 shares or something like that. And they think, well, I want to do something more with this. Or maybe that same person has a side business. They are a solopreneur. They want to do more to bridge that gap. And it is really tricky because what I've seen is that a lot of times when people who have a great response and following on the personal things that they're sharing, try to interject the business stuff into it, it's crickets. Nobody responds and nobody shares it. And then when they share the personal stuff again, it's brilliant and people are sharing it. So I think it's a really tricky, and I don't think I have good like fail-proof advice on it, but my gut says to keep them separate until you have a strong enough like following on both to integrate them together.
Well, and I'll jump in on that as well. I think part of it depends, because for some people, their person is a huge part of their brand. And so there's a guy named Neil Patel who has some great resources out there. His website, just at neilpatel.com. He has a ton of content on building traffic to your website. And so he is a key part of that brand. And so even though he has a team of content writers, a lot of it is written first person. He's in all his videos. And so he is very much intertwined with his business. Now, depending on what kind of business you're in, if you're B2B, if it's a larger company, you might have different people who are personalities of the company. For a long time, Ford had a guy, I want to say his name was Scott Monty, maybe, and I may be completely messing up his name, but he became a personality who was visible and recognizable as sort of a spokesperson for Ford in certain areas. So there are definitely times where a certain person is sort of becomes a personality for a brand. And so a blog, one of the things with a blog is knowing the tone of your company. Some companies are very personable. They take that sort of approach. Their language is a little bit more casual. And others are more buttoned up. So, if they're in the financial industry, maybe it's more about dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It needs to be good information, but there's not as much flexibility in being jokes or things along those lines. So that's going to be a big part of it as well. And then Robert, you also asked about plugins that we recommend. The majority of the websites that we build and work in are on WordPress, and so there is a plugin called Yoast, Yoast, which is really, it's widely used. We use it. So you may want to take a look at that. And that will give you insight into, the keywords on your site. It'll make recommendations. It'll identify some of the technical things, both on your blog and just on other website pages, to help you optimize for the search results. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that we talk about is there's this balance. So we're talking about, hey, Robert, you're welcome. I see you're already using Yoast. So thanks for those questions, guys. So, when you're writing a blog, know who your audience is, because you don't want to write for you. You might not be your audience. In fact, you might not be the best person to write your blog. And you might have great things to say. However, writing might not be your strongest skill set, and that's okay. Not everybody is a writer, and writing content that people will read. It's not just a science. It's not just putting words down. There's an art to it. There's experience that goes with that. So it may be that it makes sense to outsource it. Find somebody. Maybe you have somebody in your team who's a great writer. Maybe there are a bunch of writing services. I mean, we write blogs for our clients. And so there are resources out there to help you if writing is not your strong point. Because when you create content, you want people to be interested in it. You want to share something that's meaningful, that's helpful, that's informative, that keeps them engaged. The content has to be good. It's not just about having it set up, as AnnieLaurie said, having your tags and these things, your keywords, so that it's relevant for the search engines. The search engines are also smart enough to know whether or not it makes sense. And so write for your audience. Think about it from your perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the search engines are looking for that. They are looking for intent and how does this make sense? Or it's amazing how intelligent the search actually is. But one thing too that I think is important to bring into at this point is it is so crucial to know the persona you're writing to, but it's also crucial to apply that StoryBrand framework, because you have got to be putting that content in the form of you're the guide and your reader is the hero. Because otherwise you're making it about yourself, you're going to lose people. And that's the hardest part, I think, especially for the old school bloggers who are used to writing that online journal. This is just my online editorial. You can't write like that and get leads. It doesn't work. It really doesn't.
So let's talk a little bit about actually creating content. We've been talking about this at a high level. It's a great way to, build traffic. Google's always looking for good content, fresh content on the website. In fact, we have a client who, there's a blog post that we wrote for them maybe 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it shows at the top of the search results for one of their niches. And it continues to drive traffic. It continues to drive leads. And so so when you're thinking about your content, what we suggest, and Robert, I see your question there about CTAs. That's a great question. We'll come back to that here in just a second. Think about your content, again, from your customer's perspective, from your prospect's perspective. A very kind of easy, simple starting point is list out the questions that they are asking. And think about this in terms of the stages that they go through when they are searching for and considering your product or service. And so if you think about this, if you put this in maybe some of these sales funnel terms, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, top of the funnel is where people are just asking questions. They're trying to gather information. What are the questions they're asking? It could be a little bit more broad, a little bit more topical. As they get further in, then maybe they're starting to ask questions that are a little bit more feature driven or comparing your service to someone else's. In fact, there's a client that I was doing a bunch of research this morning, competitive research in the content space, and using that to inform what we're going to do for them blogging wise. And several of the top posts that are showing up in their space are comparison type posts. It's like, hey, here are services to consider. And so as you get further in, the questions are going to change. So just think through what are the questions that you're getting asked and use that as a springboard. Now, another question that we get, AnnieLaurie, is, well, how often should I blog? Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that if you don't have a blog, you should blog as often as you can maintain with regularity and consistency. So if that for you is once a month, then you blog once a month and you blog and you post every month on the same day. If you have more capacity, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's twice a week. I mean, I probably wouldn't post more than 3 times a week, because then that's too much content for somebody to like digest all at once. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to overwhelm your audience with a ton of great content. Spread that out. If you've got that much to say and can get it out quick, then you've got 6 months of content ready. But I tend to recommend sticking to 3 times a week at a maximum. But the consistency of it is the key. The worst thing, and I've done this so many times on my own blog, is posting and then not posting again for an undetermined amount of time. Like, that's the part, that's where you lose audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's be consistent. Think about what you can manage. You're going to spend several hours per blog post typically, because you're going to think about what the topic is. You're going to write it. You're going to do a draft. You're going to think of, a number of headlines, which I want to make sure we talk about headlines, because that's what's going to grab somebody's attention. Mm-hmm. The other thing to think about too is when you're creating a blog, use it in multiple ways. Don't just put it on your website. That's absolutely, I mean, that's the point of a blog. Create social media. If you have a blog post, you should be able to get 3 to 4 social media posts just from that blog. That becomes a way to drive people back. Mm-hmm. If you have an email list, send your blog post to your email list, whether it's weekly, whether it's once a month. And I want to make sure too that your expectations about a blog getting traffic to your website, that's a long-term play. Anytime we're talking about search engine optimization, getting more traffic to your website through the search engines, it takes time. Now, the more blogging you do, the faster that starts to generate meaningful results. And HubSpot has a lot of statistics out there in terms of a certain number of blog posts that once you hit certain numbers, you start to get some more critical mass. But that's why when you create the content, look for other ways to purpose it. Sometimes you can associate it with a Facebook ad and get that in front of people as a way to get people to your website. So there are different ways to leverage that. This is not a silver bullet. This is part of an overall content strategy plan, but it becomes the hub. So a couple of other things to think about. One is, now I want to go to Robert's question, is where and how often should a CTA, that's a call to action, be included in or on a blog post? Minimum, at least one. There needs to be, typically, you can put a good call to action at the end of the blog post. When you're creating this content, you want to have something there that is informative. It's educational. You're answering questions, and you want to make sure that you do connect it to what you want somebody to do. This is marketing. This is not just informational. We do want to use this from a marketing perspective. So definitely at the end, have a call to action, whatever that is. Hey, schedule a discovery call, or maybe you have some sort of a downloadable PDF. Hey, download this PDF. Now, another way to do that, two other ways to do CTA, well, not just two, but two ways that you can do a CTA is do one midstream. And that can be text only. That could be a little banner. There are different tools out there like Opt-in Monster that will let you create a little banner that goes in the middle of the content. So as they're flowing through, there's a little thing right there. Again, you could have that one could be download this guide. And then the one at the bottom could be schedule a discovery call, schedule a demo, whatever that next direct call to action is. And then using a pop-up is another way, either timed pop-up when somebody gets to the page, they're there for 45 seconds, they're there for a minute, little pop-up. You can also do an exit intent pop-up. So as they're leaving, it pops up. Now, obviously, that doesn't function quite as well on mobile device. So if you have a lot of mobile traffic, that may not be as good of an option.
I think there's some subtle ways too. Anytime when you're writing your content and you're providing the solution to the problem, I think there's some subtle ways too, in addition to what Steve's saying, to link to areas, maybe a service area on your website. If you've just written a paragraph about how your customer has a problem and you have the solution, there's a subtle way to link that just in the dialogue that you've created without having it be a pop-up or a graphic. Those need to be there too, but you can really weave in a lot of calls to action if you start to just remember, how am I solving the problem? Is that solution on my website? Can I link? Think about linking the content of your blog to other parts of your website.
Yeah, to other blog posts. That's a really good way to use your content, cross-link it. That's good for the search engines, and it's also just good for users as they go through. Now, Catherine just asked the question, what are some different ways that I can recycle the content? And so she mentioned, which great suggestion there, Catherine. I know you're very strong on LinkedIn, is LinkedIn articles. And so especially, a lot of the folks we work with are B2B. And so LinkedIn is the natural social platform to be on if that's your space. And so, yes, create these articles and, link that back to your website. One approach is to do maybe the first couple of paragraphs of your blog post and then have it linked back to your site where people go there to finish reading it. Another thing, Catherine, some people will do is they'll have something set up on medium.com and have that content there as well. And I've seen some different schools of thought in terms of duplicate content. So there may be some variation that you do there just to tweak it a little bit, but that becomes another outlet for getting it. And one of the things to think about too is you think about repurposing that content. Two thoughts. One, as you think about the social media post that you're creating around that blog post, if that is a topic that is going to be, timely, maybe it's evergreen, so the topic's going to be relevant for a really long time. You can link your social content back to it 6 months from now as a way to sort of resurface that. So you can give thought to that. Another thing you can think about is create video content based on your blog. And whether it's verbatim, whether it's just the blog itself is a springboard, create a video, put it on YouTube. You can then distribute that through the social channels and embed the video back in the blog post, because Google has given some extra attention here recently to blog posts that also have videos.
You can also run some ads on your blog posts, so you could have like a Facebook ad or something like that where it's linking back to your blog post. It's a different way to repurpose the content to a larger audience.
So a couple of questions. Robert's got some questions, so we'll come back to those here in just a minute. So I want to talk a little bit about planning. So that when you're planning your content, the length of the content. So that's a question a lot of people ask. Well, how long should my content be? Well, I'm going to say it depends. Blog posts with 1,000 words or more tend to do better as far as search, getting ranked in search is concerned. Actually, what I'm seeing here recently and what I'm seeing from HubSpot, and actually just based on some of the research that I was doing even this morning, honestly, a lot of the blogs that are getting first page attention are more than 2,000 words, 2,000, 2,500 words. And HubSpot has some research that's based on their own blogging, seeing what's getting the most traffic. Now, again, you may not have capacity to do a 2,000 word blog post every week. That's fine. If you have capacity to do 500 or 1,000, great, do 500 or 1,000. But so that's part of what's out there as far as the length of it goes. Make sure you include some images, break it up with bullet points. Don't just do a block of text, make it easy for people to read. A tool to take a look at is Grammarly. Grammarly is a fantastic tool. It gives you another set of AI eyes to identify maybe some grammar mistakes. I use it. It saves my butt a lot of times, just silly little things that I'm typing out an email, but it's a good double check. I'll never skip getting another human to take a look at it and do a review of it. Incorporate video when you can, link to other relevant articles, information, even outside of your own site. And most websites now are being built on WordPress, which has blog functionality built in. You have sites like Squarespace and Wix and other platforms that have blog functionality built in. Another good call to action is have people subscribe to get your blogs by email. Have a little box that could be a simple call to action that's low commitment, but it's a way for you to stay in front of people. Okay, so Robert, and we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, guys. Mobile traffic. That's going to come down to a web development thing. Now, if you're on a platform like Squarespace, it doesn't have as much customization that can be done. So really, it's just working with your developer to make sure that it looks good on mobile and testing it on Android, iPhone, etc., smartphones, tablets. Definitely take a look at your Google Analytics to get an idea of what percentage of your traffic is coming in on mobile. And then a series of posts is the other question. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, that's great. We do that periodically for Wayfind. We do that for clients where we'll create a series and we'll start off with sort of an overview. HubSpot actually talks about creating what they call pillar content, which is just like this really long page, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 words of content that ultimately links back to these other blog posts that have a specific focus within that overall topic that the pillar content's focused on. So creating a series where you're linking back and forth to each other is great, because that just gives your readers a reason to come back to see what the next part is next week. Once the series is done, it gives them the ability to go back, and that actually can become content that you put into a downloadable PDF as well, so people can get it in a single platform or single document. Manny Day, reading time. Robert, as far as what the average reading time should be, I think that's going to vary. I would measure it more on word count and just making sure that it's being written where it's easily readable. Now, for if a company is focused on really more technical types of services, and so the language is more technical in nature, obviously the read time would be different. And again, that's going back, making sure that the audience is familiar with the terms and terminology being used in the blog. And that's where you look at your competitors, look at others in the industry, look at articles that are being written by publications that are supporting your industry. Do a Google search for whatever the keyword phrases are that are important, and look at articles and blogs that are being written. How long are they? And that'll give you a point of reference for what other people in the space are doing, and it also lets you know what they're doing. Maybe try to find some different ways to stand out from the noise. Wow, I feel like we just barely scratched the surface. Hey, Robert, you're welcome, man. I'm glad he's just putting a note in there. So I appreciate both of you. Thanks for your insight and your time. Man, more than happy to. Thanks for joining us today. This will be available on as our podcast next week. So make sure you check that out. If you were here, fantastic. You go back to it, re-listen to it, rewatch it on our YouTube channel or on our website, wayfindmarketing.com. If you have other questions, reach out to us. You can get in touch with us. You can reach me, Steve, at wayfindmarketing.com. There's so much more that we could have gotten to today if we just had another 3 hours. And so, AnnieLaurie, thank you. Some great insight just based on your experience. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have a fantastic weekend. We will be back next Friday with another topic to help you grow your business by making marketing easier. Have a great and safe weekend, everybody.